Hello friends, welcome to Unit R, Day 2, College Algebra. We're going to be looking over algebraic expressions and the properties of real numbers. When jumping into this, we have a few properties. These should be review from earlier algebraic courses you've taken, probably a pre-algebra or algebra 1. When we talk about the properties of real numbers, we're going to be using addition and multiplication. I just want to remind you that subtraction is just inverse addition and division is just inverse multiplication. So most of these can apply in that instance as well. First, let's talk about the commutative property. Commutative property, if I have a number A and another number B, then the commutative property states that A plus B is the same as B plus A. In multiplication, this is if you take A times B, then that's the same as B times A. With the associative property, essentially associative, think about who you associate, that's who you group with. So this idea has to do with properties of grouping. So we have A plus, and then in parentheses B plus C. Well, that's the same as if we group together A plus B first, and then added C. Now, associative doesn't work with subtraction, because of how subtraction properties work. So this works in this instance, but doesn't necessarily work with subtraction. It depends on the scenario or situation. And then with multiplication, same idea. BC equals A times B, and then times C. So if you take B times C first, and then multiply by A, that's the same as A times B, and then multiply by C. Identity. The additive identity is 0, so if you add 0 to any value or number, it does not change. It remains what its identity is. And then for multiplication, if you multiply times 1, you will not change the value. So the multiplicative identity is 1. The inverse, in this case, is opposite A, or negative A, and that gets you to the identity. So the inverse is what you have to do to a value to get to the identity for that value. So the additive inverse is negative A, because that gets you to the additive identity, which is 0. And then for multiplication, it is the reciprocal, so 1 over A. And then that gets you to the multiplicative identity. With the distributive property, this combines both. So if I think of A times parentheses B plus C, that's the same as AB plus AC. We normally see it written that way, but it's not always. In fact, sometimes it's written with whatever you're distributing after the set of parentheses, and that's fine too. For example, if you had B plus C times A, then that's the same as also AB plus AC. Now, think about this. If I multiply A to both of these, or if I multiply B to A and then C to A, this is the end result. You may have to reorder it so that it looks the same. Let's do some examples of these. So I'm asking you what each of these properties are. So what you could do right now is you could pause the video and work through these. I recommend doing so whenever we get to example problems. Properties of real numbers. So for this first one, this is the commutative property for addition. For this next one, 2 plus 3 plus 2 equals 3 plus 2 plus 4. This is also the commutative property. It may look like it's associative because of those parentheses. However, it's not, because all we're doing is just changing the order. And then 3 times in parentheses x plus 5 gives us 3x plus 15. This is the distributive property. Next one for number 4. This is the associative property. For multiplication. For number 5, this is the additive identity. With number 6, this is the multiplicative identity. It's not. I apologize. That is not the multiplicative identity. That's the inverse. That's the multiplicative inverse. I was looking at that and thinking, wait a second. That's not quite right. There we go. That's the multiplicative inverse. The next one, 2 times 4 equals 4 times 2. We're just changing the order, so that's commutative. With multiplication. And then 2 plus negative 2 equals 0, so this is the additive identity. Sorry, this is the additive inverse. Whew. Additive inverse. We obtain 0 is the additive identity. That's where my brain was going. Got to slow it down. So 2 plus negative 2 is the inverse of 2, the additive inverse of 2. That's why we end up with 0. Remember, 0 is the additive identity. 1 is the multiplicative identity. 9, we're not changing the order, but we are changing the grouping. So this would be associative. Of addition.
May, please report to student administration. Daryl May, please report to student administration.
And then over here on 10, we have 3 times 1 equals 3. This is the multiplicative identity. (11) 1 times x equals x. This is also the multiplicative identity. And then for 12, 2 fifths times 5 halves equals 1. This is the multiplicative inverse. Now, whenever we're going through and solving with these, we have what's called the order of operations. You probably remembered some fancy acronym or saying with PIMDOS. I learned please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And what this is just tells us the order that we need to go through and solve order of operations. So first we do parentheses. Parentheses. And then 2 is exponents. Exponents. 3, we do multiplication and division from left to right. And then number 4, we do addition and subtraction, also from left to right. Join me in my next video as I continue on with example number 2.